The National Hurricane Center has upgraded Tropical Storm Lee to a hurricane. The storm is expected to intensify to a major hurricane by Saturday morning. Lee's predicted to travel west-northwest towards the Leeward Islands of the Caribbean before turning north to Puerto Rico. Also, the U.S. continues to deal with major heat waves throughout the Northeast and once again back towards Texas and New Mexico. And all of that and more in this video. Now, while we get started talking about Hurricane Lee, there's a few things I want to point out really fast. We can start really seeing the rapid intensification with Hurricane Lee. You see how these storms really start to ramp up. Watch right here as you see how it starts to form an eye wall, and you see all this gray wrapping around. That is some thunderstorms starting to rotate around a low pressure system. So as I just said, there's a few things I pointed out that kind of show rapid intensification. Here's one more thing to kind of back that up. You see how everything here is moving counterclockwise in the middle of Lee. Now on the outside, you see everything moving clockwise. That's what's called an outflow boundary. And what that's doing is that's blocking all the shear trying to come towards Lee. And what that's going to do is help Lee intensify very quickly, so that shear really does not tear Lee to pieces. Alright, so we kind of talked about how strong Lee can be and really what he's doing right now, but let's take a look at where he's projected to go. Right now, we kind of see him heading west, kind of towards the eastern coast of the U.S. You can kind of tell by really how tight these spaghetti models are here, staying right here near the middle. But to get back here where it starts to see around 960 millibars, how it kind of spreads out more. This is kind of what we call the rage of uncertainty. So we're not really sure what it's doing. But what we do know is we do have a high pressure system right here to the north of this starting to really guide Lee to the west. These spaghetti models are known to change some, so if you're in Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and the Leeward Islands, I really wouldn't be too concerned about it for right now. You may have a very low impact from this storm. So what I would do right now, if I were you, I would really be preparing for waves from this storm being pushed onto shore and very high rip currents that will start affecting your area. So everyone is wondering, is this going to impact the U.S.? And the best answer I can give you is, I don't know. But what I can show you is a few models real quick. This is the GFS. The GFS has it riding right up the eastern seaboard, but it really doesn't show it making landfall in this specific run. So we've looked at the GFS, but now let's look at the Euro. The Euro actually has it kind of missing New England here. It has it missing New York, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, the northeastern seaboard. But what it's really showing is a very possible landfall in the southeastern quadrant of Canada. So kind of north of Maine. Now so I'm not going to say that's really what's going to happen. Once again, it's still kind of too far out for me to really, give you a definite yes or no on where it's making landfall, if it's going to make landfall. But this is our best guess that we can give you right now. So we've talked about what the models are showing about Lee so far, but there's something I do want to bring up real quick. Is something that may influence Lee to come a little bit closer to the U.S. than what may be forecasted here. Now, we do have a bit of a trough set up here around the eastern side of the country here, but the problem is this. Everything here is on a positive tilt, and that's kind of pushing Lee away. Now, if this by any chance were to go negative, a negative tilt, so instead of being tilted like this, it's more tilted like that. It's actually going to pull Lee closer to the U.S. than what's going to be originally forecasted here. So is it really going to impact the U.S.? I gave you the scenario where it could, but I'll tell you what I do know. If you live in the Florida Keys, Florida, Georgia, and even the Carolinas, I will say you're pretty much in the clear. Now, there is a few things I do want to bring up that will impact you. You're going to have very large swells and very strong rip currents. So remember that if you're headed out to the beach or whatever on the weekend or for a family vacation. So be cautious of the coast while Lee is making his round off the East Coast. Now, one thing I do need to talk about is how rapidly Lee will intensify. Shear will, and I'm not saying it might, shear will lessen, which is going to help Lee very quickly gain all that strength. But also look at the temps here around for the surface temp here in the water. 82 degrees. That is piping hot, and that's nothing but fuel for Hurricane Lee. Now, because of its very rapid intensification, we're looking at a high-end Cat 4 and possibly a Cat 5. I'm not really going to say too much on that right now because it's still a little too far out, but we're going to look at a very major hurricane here. So right now will be a great time for me to remind you about your hurricane plan. So really, just to be safe, if you live on the eastern seaboard, please just go ahead and start getting ready to take your hurricane precautions. Make sure you have canned foods, water, stuff like that, just in case worst case scenario does happen. Now, if you're around Bermuda or anything, I'd really start focusing on this because this really could impact you. I'd make sure you start taking your extra precautions now as well. But if you're in Florida or anything, I believe you should be fine. You just went through Idalia, so if push comes to shove, do the exact same thing you did for Idalia. So there's a few things I want you to think about right now. If you decide to ride this thing out, if it makes landfall in New England or in southeastern Canada, make sure you have sandbags and stuff placed around your property, mainly around your entrances, just to keep water coming into your house. But whenever the government puts out something involving evacuation, please take all this seriously, because this is really nothing that you want to deal with, especially if it makes landfall as a category 4, category 3, or even a category 5. So make sure you take all your precautions. So now that all of our tropical stuff is down, I still want to talk about something. So let's talk about this heat wave that's been affecting everybody for the last few months. Now, if you're on the eastern side of the U.S., I got good news. It's finally going to start to subside. But the bad news is this. You're still going to have temperatures around the high 80s to low 90s during the day. But the good news of it is this. In the evening times, you're going to be getting to the mid-60s. Bad news about this is if you're in Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Arizona, you're still going to have temperatures well above 100 degrees in some localized areas. You're still going to have that temperatures staying around the mid-90s. So this weather pattern overall for severe weather is still going to stay pretty quiet. There'll be sunshine over the U.S., and we've still kind of got to keep an eye on the tropics to watch everything that's going on. We're just now really starting to get into the beginning of hurricane season, even after the landfall of Hurricane Idalia. So be patient with me as we get more information about Hurricane Lee in the tropics later on during the month and later on in the year as well. We still got several more weeks of hurricane season left. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe and hit that like button. That helps us out a lot. And because you've subscribed to the channel, you'll be able to see when we post new videos, because we're going to try to start updating you guys maybe once or twice a week on everything going on. But until next time, you guys stay weather aware. Recently, we just got monetized. If you feel obligated or you feel like you want to support us anyway, make sure you click that join button. That's going to help us further everything. That's going to help us upgrade our equipment and help fund our chases so we can provide ground truth and content for you guys. So if you feel obligated or you want to, please click that join button.